Hello and welcome to Grocer Pod. My name is Sean Kosednar. I am coming to you from the 2025 Innovation Showcase. Show's wrapping up here. I had a day and a half of some great interviews that are going to come out over the next few weeks. I'm excited for you to hear all about them. Up first, I'm going to be talking to Carey Berger from Crossroads. We always have great conversations, but before I get to Carey, I want to remind you to please subscribe to Grocer Pod. Subscribing means new episodes will be downloaded for you each week. You can find Grocer Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any other place you use to listen to podcasts. And now, here's my conversation with Carey Berger. I'm joined once again by Carey Berger from Crossroads. Carey, how are you finding the show so far?
Doing great. It's one of the best ones yet.
So we're talking today about how to find more buyers if you're looking to sell your store. So talk us through that process.
Very good. Well, first of all, we got to put a little perspective on what's happening in the world. We all have this sort of sky is falling feeling sometimes. In truth, there's always going to be a cycle of people coming and going, getting a little older. It's time for them to move on. And that's always the case. We may be at a place where there's more than normal for a couple reasons. One, we all know about the baby boomer generation, and a lot of those folks are getting to a place where it is time for the next stage in life. Number two, with COVID, we wound up with a period of time where we had stores that were, they were doing fine, but they had a certain amount of debt. They were building structures that were functional. They get into COVID, and we wind up having two big things occur during all that. One, most people were able to pay off their debt. So now all of a sudden the barriers to exit may have gone away because we've solved that. We may have also put, hopefully, some money in our pockets. So our view of retirement starts to look more attractive, more rosy. And next, we're just tired. We worked really hard during 2020. And so, a lot of grocers, that's where they find themselves. It's like, well, hey, my debt's gone. I got some cash and I'm exhausted. It's time to look at something else. So right now there is a bit of a peak in terms of the number of people who are looking to make a transaction or transition out. For that reason, I think it's really important right now we talk about how do we expand that pool of potential buyers. And we don't have to solve all the problems of the world. This isn't, we don't have the magic wand. We don't run the industry. But from an individual point of view, as a grocer, you have the option to look maybe beyond what you normally think of. The two places most everybody thinks about are either, number one, I have a daughter or son that's in the business. I've been spending these past many years training and developing them, and they're ready, and I can pass on to them. There were a whole lot of ifs in that statement right there. Do I have the son or daughter? Do I have them trained and developed? Do they have an interest? There's a whole lot there. But nonetheless, that's obviously probably the most commonly thought of path and one of the most desired paths for most family-owned businesses. And if it exists, then the key is to recognize it and help it to evolve. In truth, there is always going to be a sweet spot in timing. So, and I'm going to sound mean, and I apologize, but if you've got a daughter or son who's going to be the next generation, and they're willing to stay in the secondary position till they're 60, they may not be the right person. There should be a certain amount of positive tension where they get to their mid-30s or 40s and they're saying, hey, it's time to me step in, which can be really daunting for the current generation but I'm still doing this. I just got good at it. This is my life. And so the idea of making a change in that role, that's a big part of the deal. And you also have to talk about the importance of, cash flow. But there's some great things to be said in there. Let me just give you a teaser and let you know we can make your taxes lower by making it a transaction than by having it just be income you're taking out of the store, both for you as an individual receiving long-term capital gains and also for the going concern, being able to have a fresh group of basis that can be depreciated. So I've tipped my hand a little bit, but you get the idea. There's a lot to be talked about, both emotionally letting go and then structurally being able to make it beneficial. So even the easy one, the one of I've got a capable son or daughter, really needs to be explored more closely. Additionally, if you're a little ways out and your son or daughter is maybe interested but hasn't had those years of preparation, You can't start too soon to get them prepared and trained and supported. And we've got great resources at AWG to help with that development, and do turn to them to be able to figure out how we can make sure that this next generation is going to do just amazing things for their community, for their team, and for you. So that's the first one. You know, if you think about it as a family transaction, that's what we think of. The one we otherwise think of is show me the money. Sell to an outsider. They need to give me cash. I don't want to carry any of this debt. I'm just going to take that money and run. And there's nothing wrong with that vision as well. There are some great buyers out there. Some of them that you all know about are ESOPs, and thus your employees get a chance to have a piece of that ownership themselves. There's a lot of great ways to do that. And again, the details matter. Most of that has to do with more of a structural discussion. Again, it's not what you get, it's what you get to keep. So the taxes really matter. Is this going to be a stock sale or an asset sale? And are we going to do this all in a single payment, or is it going to come over time, and all those details? But that's where most people go, is to, I want an outsider who's got deep pockets, who's going to pay me the most money I can get. And that's a fine option also. Somewhere in the middle, though, is this category that doesn't get talked about very often. And that category is someone who is inside, but not family. So without using any names, we got a husband and wife that were running the meat department and the store operations. At some point, we were able to identify them as really capable of running this store. We were able to talk to the current owner and convince him to sell it to them on terms. Now, what I mean by on terms, well, again, hypothetically speaking, that person who's inside does not have the money for 20% down to go to the bank or whatever else. And so where's the money come from? The answer is going to be seller financing. Well, if we're talking about seller financing, and that's not the only answer, and that's not the only tool, but let's just talk about that briefly, and then we'll wrap this up. When we're talking about seller financing, it's only really a worthy discussion to the extent that the seller is going to be physically and mentally, emotionally stable for probably at least 3 years. They don't need to be there for 30 years, but they need at least 2 to 3 years, because that allows that if something goes wrong, they can take back the store, they can move back in, they can either operate it or they can sell it, but they've still got the ability to do that. If you're sitting at a place where you're past that point, seller financing isn't for you. There's too many risks that you can't control if you're not able to step back in and control it. But if you are in that place and you do have that ability, the advantage is that if you get a structure created and you do a full sale with 100% seller financing, what's happened? Well, number one, you've got a buyer who otherwise had no other place to buy. They'll pay full price. They should. And they're appreciative, and they do their part, bring their energy and all that success. But number two, when we get about 3 years down, they'll be that far into the payoff period, and the banks will be happy to loan them the money to refinance and pay you off. If the banks, for whatever reason, were at least skittish, the SBA actually has a program that guarantees that after 2 to 3 years of operation successfully, that they will ensure that refi can occur, and so the seller will not be holding that note for the long term. Now, you may choose to stay in that note because you like it, you like the interest rate, you like the payments, it works out well for you, no problem, but you should have the real option to cash out in less than 3 years. So it's not as scary. It's not like seller financing is a 30-year commitment. No, it's a 3-year commitment. But it is important that you understand that it's not for everybody, because you have to be able to truly monitor it, because you're the banker. And from the buyer's point of view, you also have to recognize that seller has the right to keep a very close look on this, because you didn't bring extra cash in. So whereas the bank has a 20 or 30% down payment, so if they lose a little bit, well, it's okay, we got a cushion. Seller finance doesn't. So the seller finance documents are going to be a lot more strict. I've occasionally called them draconian, but quite honestly, they're there for good reasons. I wouldn't allow a bank to have the rights to do the kind of review that we're talking about, because the bank wouldn't know what to do with it. They don't understand grocery. But the seller's been doing this for maybe 40 years. He or she, they do know how to interpret those numbers. They do know when it's time to pull the parachute. And besides, you probably were working with with him in the past. So you should look at it as a 2 to 3 year period where you're the owner, but you still really are beholden to that seller, and you have to understand that dynamic. So there's a certain amount of that to be dealt with too. Is did I buy it? Yes. Well, that means I can do anything I want. No, because you did seller financing and you didn't bring the cash. But those are some of the thoughts we talk about here on Crossroads, and in particular right now, when we're looking at our options, most people either they'll generally say, well, I don't have anybody inside, so I want to sell the outside for cash. That's as far as they get. Let's look beyond that. Or I think I have somebody inside. Well, let's talk about that. Or, I got this all solved. I've got my daughter or my son. Well, again, those details matter. So that's where all this comes together at this turbulent time. But have hope. The sky is not falling. We're just in the normal cycle, and there's a lot of activity going on in this area right now. That's why we talk about it.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a couple of things that I was thinking. First is, we're talking about a larger pool of sellers. I only run a podcast. Don't have any background in economics, but if there's a large pool of sellers, that means there's probably going to be a smaller pool of buyers. So coming up with a new third option besides, internal family people and external, it seems like a really smart play, because there's going to be fewer of those external people looking to buy if there's so many people selling. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Not only are there fewer of them, but they're not looking to pay as much. So as a seller, if you're looking to get your maximum price, expanding your buyer pool really matters. And remember, like I said, you're not harming anybody on that internal transaction piece by getting full price. You're giving them an opportunity they couldn't get anyplace else, and they should be paying you full price for that. And you may not have to negotiate quite as hard with them as you would with the outsider who's holding the pile of cash in front of you. Actually, it can be very lucrative for the seller to expand that pool of buyers and potentially then increase the price they get for it.
What advice do you have for the seller that goes through that seller financing option? Because we've talked before about I sold my store, and like the mental process that they have to go through after that. Like maybe you don't want to spend so much time in the store because things are going to be changing. How do they balance that? They're not the owner, sort of, like they've sold, but they're still the financing it, so they need to monitor the business. What's the balancing act that someone has to go through doing that?
Generally speaking, you can think of it in terms of, am I looking at the numbers, or am I looking at some of how I run the store? It'll be similar. You're still going to say that store looks dirty, that store is not being maintained. Those are critical things. Yes, you really do look at those. But operations do have to become in the name of the next person, and let them find their own identity and create their own market for the client. And it is a difficult balance. You're exactly right. I think the difference, the easiest way I can describe it is you can be a seller under seller financing and just check on it once every month or so. Can't do that as an operator. Mm-hmm. So there's our difference, if nothing else. Maybe you're still kind of forced to act like an operator. You're still going to be coming into those stores, but instead of coming in daily or weekly, you literally can come in every month or two and get the job done. If you looked at your numbers and you have good quality numbers, not to shill for FMS, but they do a great job of giving you current numbers that you can review. You should be logging into that, maybe from Cancun or wherever it is that you are, and making sure where the numbers are, because the numbers can be reviewed without being on site, and then you can do your on-site time, every month or two. So that's the real difference. You became one step closer, but you are still responsible.
Well, Carey, I appreciate you stopping by. It's always a great conversation.
Well, thank you so very much. Appreciate you, and look forward to talking again soon.
And thank you all for listening. I want you to be on the lookout for more great conversations that I had here at Innovation Showcase 2025. I'll be rolling those out over the next few weeks. So you are going to hear everything that I talked about, as well as some of the Learning Lounge content. There's going to be a lot, so you're going to want to like and subscribe to Grocer Pod. Subscribing means new episodes will be downloaded for you automatically each week. And until next week, this has been Kosednar for Grocer Pod.